I wasn't supposed to hear it. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, phone pressed to his ear. I was upstairs folding laundry, half listening to the hum of his voice drifting through the vents. At first, it was background noise, just another conversation with his mother, who called almost every evening. But then his tone shifted. Sharper. Colder. She's family, he said, his voice low and certain. There was a pause, the kind that stretches like a wire before it snaps. You're temporary. He said it so casually. Like he was stating the weather. The words slid under my skin before my mind even registered them. My hands froze over the towel I was folding, and for a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Temporary. Like I was a guest. Like I was furniture. Like I was a placeholder until he decided on something more permanent. I stayed still, waiting for him to correct himself, to backtrack, to say he didn't mean it that way. But he didn't. He just kept talking, as if nothing about that sentence had been cruel, as if nothing about those words had just rearranged my entire life. I walked to the top of the stairs and listened harder. His mother's voice bled faintly through the speaker, sharp and approving. He told her not to worry, that she'd always come first, that nothing would change between them. I had always known she didn't like me. She didn't hide it. She rolled her eyes at the meals I cooked, criticized the way I decorated the house, reminded me constantly that her son had higher standards before he met me. But I hadn't realized he agreed with her. Not until now. I walked back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of me. I stared at the folded laundry in my lap, at the neat, domestic proof of the life I thought we were building, and felt stupid. Because in that one sentence, everything I thought was solid started to feel fragile. I thought of every holiday she'd needed him for. Every time he'd left me alone at a table so he could drive to her house at midnight because she couldn't sleep. Every weekend we'd planned together that she had accidentally disrupted. I had convinced myself that was what love looked like. Compromise. Patience. Understanding. But love isn't supposed to make you invisible. I walked downstairs an hour later. He was still on the phone, leaning against the fridge, voice soft now, almost gentle. He didn't notice me. I watched him laugh at something she said, watched him assure her, no, she won't be an issue. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. It was me. I went back upstairs, closed the door, and sat in the dark. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was something quieter. Something heavier. A realization that I wasn't just married to a man with a controlling mother. I was married to a man who thought that meant I didn't matter. And once you hear something like that, really hear it, you can't go back to folding laundry and pretending it didn't happen. Because one sentence had changed everything. And it was the last time I would ever let him decide what I was worth. The next morning, nothing looked different, but everything felt wrong. The sunlight still slipped through the kitchen window, hitting the same chipped tile on the counter. The coffee still brewed, filling the room with its familiar smell. He still sat at the table, scrolling through his phone like he did every morning, wearing the same gray t-shirt he always wore. But I couldn't look at him the same way. Temporary. That word was lodged behind my ribs like glass. When he asked me if I wanted toast, I stared at him for a long moment before nodding. He smiled like nothing had shifted, like he hadn't said the sentence that kept ringing in my head all night. She's family, you're temporary. I wondered if he even remembered saying it. Or if it was so natural to him that it didn't register, just words falling out of his mouth in rhythm with his mother's breathing on the other end of the line. The rest of the day, I found myself noticing things I had ignored for years. The framed photo of him and his mother on the mantel, the only picture there, even though we'd been married for nearly a decade. The way his phone always faced down on the counter when she called, as if our conversations couldn't even share the same air. The stack of mail on the table, all addressed only to him, the mortgage statements, the property tax notices, the homeowner's insurance. My name wasn't on a single envelope. I had told myself it didn't matter, back when we bought the house. "We'll add your name later," he'd said, and I had nodded. Because I trusted him. Because I believed we were building something together. But now I saw it for what it was, not an oversight. A choice. I thought about the birthdays we'd spent at her house because it's just easier for Mom. The Christmas mornings I'd woken up alone because he left before sunrise to help her with the decorations. The weekends she just happened to stop by, and the way she'd plant herself in the kitchen like she owned it, opening cabinets and making comments about the way I folded towels. And the worst part? I had let it happen. I'd been patient. I'd been understanding. I'd told myself, this is how marriage works, you make space for his family. But what happens when there's no space left for you? I started replaying every conversation, every decision. The time I asked if we could repaint the living room, and he said, "Ask Mom what color she likes." The time we talked about starting a family, and he said, "We'll have to see what Mom thinks." Mom. 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 Every answer looped back to her. I realized I hadn't been living in my own marriage. I'd been living in hers. By evening, I wasn't angry, not the kind of anger that boils over and burns. This was a colder anger, the kind that seeps into the cracks and stays. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't ask him why he said it. Because I didn't need the excuse. I already knew the truth. I just sat at the dinner table, quiet, smiling when he spoke, nodding when he rambled on about work and his mother's latest crisis. And under that calm silence, something shifted. A decision. Not yet fully formed, but inevitable. Because once you hear yourself called temporary, you start wondering what permanence would feel like. And I knew I wouldn't find it here. Not with him. Not like this. The change started so small, even I barely noticed it. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I didn't demand an apology, because I already knew what he'd say. He'd smile, offer some hollow excuse, maybe even call me dramatic. And if I cried, he'd dismiss that too. So I smiled instead. When his mother called during dinner, I handed him the phone with a steady hand and a soft "of course." When she forgot to knock before walking into our house, I greeted her politely, even made her tea. And when he leaned over and kissed my forehead like I was some pet he kept well-fed, I smiled at that too. He thought my silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant calculation. While he was busy assuming I had accepted my place, I was making appointments. Quietly. The first was with a lawyer. I told her everything, the house in his name, the finances tied up with his mother, the way he had drained accounts before without even looking at me. She didn't gasp. She didn't look surprised. She just nodded and started writing notes. "We'll start with the basics," she said. "Do you have access to bank records?" "All of them," I said. "Good. Do you know if your name is on the deed?" I hesitated. "No." Her pen paused over the page. "Then that," she said simply, "is where we begin." The next few weeks felt like living two lives. By day, I played the role he expected, the agreeable wife who nodded and smiled, the woman who stayed quiet while his mother rearranged the cabinets. I even let him think I was still soft. That I still believed every story he spun. But at night, I was someone else. I sat at the kitchen table with stacks of papers, tax forms, bank statements, mortgage documents. I highlighted. I tabbed. I made copies. I learned the law like it was a language. I found the prenup, the one I barely glanced at before signing years ago, and read every single word. He had thought it protected him. It didn't. In fact, it left the house vulnerable in ways he didn't understand, because he had been too arrogant to have it rewritten after we married. I found small, almost invisible cracks in his so-called control. And I slipped through every one. I didn't confront him. I didn't warn him. I planned. The lawyer told me exactly what to do. Exactly when to do it. Exactly how to wait for the right moment. And so I waited. When he asked me to help organize receipts for tax season, I smiled and said, of course. When he left property documents lying on the table, I studied every line. When he mentioned refinancing, I made a note. Because he didn't think I was capable of this. He thought I was temporary. Temporary people don't plan. Temporary people don't learn the laws. Temporary people don't gather evidence. But I wasn't temporary. I was building permanence, page by page, signature by signature, all while he sipped tea and told his mother how compliant I'd become. And every time she called me soft or useless in the background, I smiled. Because I knew something neither of them knew. By the time they realized what I was doing, it would already be too late. It didn't happen all at once. The plan was paper, and paper takes time. Andrea, the lawyer with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, mapped it all out for me. She didn't ask if I was scared. She asked what I wanted. I want to walk away, I said, but I want the house. Her pen tapped the table once, twice. Then we take the house. The way she said it, calm and certain, made it sound simple. But I knew it wouldn't be. He'd never just hand it over. Men like him don't surrender what they think they own, not even when they're wrong. So I started quietly. I called the county clerk and requested copies of every property document we'd signed since buying the house. I sat in my car in the parking lot, flipping through them while the AC hummed. His name. Always his. But Andrea was right, there were cracks. The prenup he'd waved in my face years ago was outdated. The mortgage had been refinanced twice but never updated to reflect our shared contributions. Every time he'd taken money from our joint account to fix up the place, it became part of our marital assets, assets I could claim. And the biggest crack? He thought I wouldn't notice. That made everything easier. I didn't hide my research from him, not exactly. I just made it look harmless. When he asked why I was going through old files, I smiled and said, "Oh, just trying to get organized." He nodded, distracted, scrolling through his phone. Probably talking to her. The next step was signatures. Andrea said, "He'll sign anything if you make it sound like it's for his benefit. Make it boring." Men ignore boring paperwork. So, I waited for tax season. One night, I spread forms across the table, real ones, not fake, and mixed in a few the lawyer had prepared. A simple deed amendment for record accuracy. A financial affidavit for tax purposes. He didn't even look up from the TV. "What's all that?" "Just stuff to make things easier for the accountant," I said, casual, almost bored. "You know how complicated taxes get with the house." He grunted. "Leave it on the counter. I'll sign them later." I stood there, pen in hand. "It's easier if you just do it now." He sighed, flipped through the pages like they were takeout menus, and signed every single one. The next morning, I took the signed papers to Andrea. She reviewed them with a nod. "This is enough," she said. "We can work with this." And we did. She filed motions. Updated records. Planted the seeds of legal ownership that were mine now, not his. Quietly, the house stopped belonging just to him. I didn't tell him. I didn't gloat. I just waited. Every day, I smiled at dinner. I kissed his cheek before he left for work. I asked about his mother and nodded when he went to see her. Because while he thought everything was the same, everything was already different. And the beauty of paper is that it moves silently. By the time he realized the locks were changing, legally, permanently, the house would already belong to me. And all it took was a few signatures. His. He came home like it was any other day. The same gravel crunching under the tires. The same heavy slam of the car door. The same jingle of keys he always tossed on the counter when he walked in. Except this time, the keys didn't work. I heard it before I saw it, the faint scrape of metal against metal, the pause, the shake, the try again. He muttered something under his breath and tried the door a third time. Then the knock came. Not angry. Just confused. I opened the door slowly, leaning on the frame. Problem? He held up the key, like I hadn't seen it 1,000 times before. It's not working. Oh, I said, tilting my head. I changed the locks. The way his face shifted, from confusion to realization to anger, was almost too fast to catch. You what? I changed the locks, I repeated, calm. It's safer this way. Safer from what? I stepped aside, letting him walk in. He tossed his bag down and paced the hallway like a man trying to shake off a nightmare. You don't just change the locks without telling me. This is my house. I smiled, a small, practiced thing. Our house. His eyes narrowed. What did you do? I didn't answer. Not yet. I just handed him the folder I'd been keeping, thick with copies, tabs, and signatures. He flipped through the first few pages, skimming like he always did. What is all this? Paperwork, I said lightly. The boring kind. The kind you signed. He stopped flipping. Looked at me. Really looked. You had me sign this? You asked me to handle the paperwork, I replied. So I did. I've been handling a lot of things, actually. He threw the folder on the table, papers scattering. You think you're clever, huh? You think you can just take what's mine? No, I said, still steady. I took what's ours. And I made sure you couldn't throw me out when it suited you. That's what's clever. He stared at me, breathing hard, his anger almost tangible. You planned this. Yes, I said, because there was no point in pretending. While you were busy telling your mother I was temporary, I was making sure I wouldn't be. The words landed. For the first time, he didn't have a response. He picked up one of the papers again, staring at his own signature like it betrayed him. Maybe it had. Why didn't you just talk to me? He asked, his voice quieter now. I held his gaze. Because talking to you meant talking to her. Because every word I said bounced off her voice before it reached you. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. Instead, he sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands, muttering, "This isn't fair." I almost laughed. Almost. Because fair would have been a marriage built on respect. Fair would have been my name on the deed from the start. Fair would have been a husband who didn't tell his mother I was disposable. This isn't about fair, I said finally. This is about balance. And for the first time since I married him, I felt it shift in my favor. He left 2 weeks later. No slammed doors. No shattered plates. No scene to mark the ending. He just packed his things into boxes, stacking them neatly by the door like he was still doing me some favor. He didn't ask for the house back. By then, even he knew it wasn't his to ask for. The paperwork was already filed. The title was already changed. My lawyer had handled every last form, every call, every stamped envelope. The house was mine, in ink, in record, in truth. When he carried the last box to the car, I stood in the doorway and watched. He hesitated, one hand on the trunk, like he might turn around and say something. But there was nothing left to say. He drove away slowly. He didn't look back. I closed the door. And this time, the lock clicked for me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind that used to sit between us at dinner when I pretended not to hear his mother on the other end of the phone. This was different. This was the kind of silence that felt like oxygen. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone to come home, or call, or tell me what I could and couldn't do. I walked through the house slowly that first night alone. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen where I used to stand at the counter while he scrolled through his phone and nodded absently at my words. All of it felt lighter. I touched the walls as I passed. Not to check their strength. To claim them. I opened every window. Let the cool evening air rush in, sweeping out the last stale breath of him. I took down the picture of him and his mother that had hung above the mantel for too long. In its place, I hung nothing. Not yet. I wanted to see the wall bare for a while, to remind myself that I could decide what would go there when I was ready. I didn't throw his things out. I didn't set fire to the memories. That's not who I am. I simply removed the parts of him that had made me feel small. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee. The same porch where his mother once stood, giving orders about how the hedges should be trimmed. The same porch where I used to stand, trying to smile while she talked over me. It didn't feel like her porch anymore. It didn't feel like his. It felt like mine. I didn't need to shout it, or carve my name into the railing, or tell the world what I'd done. I just sat there, breathing, knowing. He had called me temporary. He had made me feel like I could be erased at any moment, replaced without hesitation. But now? Now I was the one thing that stayed. The house was more than walls and keys and paperwork. It was proof. Proof that the woman they underestimated, the one they thought would fold, who would always be polite, always be quiet, wasn't just still standing. She was standing on her own ground. And no one could take it from her again.